Hello, everyone, and welcome to our webinar, Tools and the Talent, Best Practices in SCAPE. This is the third episode in our Beyond SASE SCAPE research series. My name is Poynter. I'm a Nemertes Fellow, and also with me is John Burke, the CTO of Nemertes, and he is presenting. We encourage you to use the BrightTalk interface to submit any questions that you have along the way. We're saving some time for Q&A at the end, and I'll try and make sure that we can get to most of your questions. With that, let's go ahead and get started. Over to you, John.
Thanks so much, Ian. Always a pleasure. And yes, saving time at the end for questions depends on how fast I talk. So I'm going to try and talk fast enough to be understood and not so fast that I don't get to breathe. So, as Ian said, we are here today to talk about success practices in the envelope of technologies encompassed by the idea of SCAPE, which we'll talk about in a second. And we'll dig into what we mean by SCAPE, the technologies involved, how they correlate to success in delivering security services, and then we will dig in with some Q&A. So please remember, throughout the process, you can loft questions to us using the panel from BrightTalk here, and as Ian said, we'll get to as many as we can at the end of the session. For those of you who are not familiar with us, Nemertes is a research and strategic advisory company, and our focus is on helping organizations realize the greatest amount of business value from their deployment of emerging technologies. We have a set of areas that we're digging into on a constant basis: security, networking, Internet of Things, and cloud and automation. Today's talk is obviously focused in the security space. And where we get the information that makes up the basis of presentations like this one is from research with enterprise IT practitioners. We conduct combination interview and survey projects to really dig into how organizations are deploying technologies, what obstacles they run into along the way, and what the most successful organizations in the research project are doing or not doing, so that we can highlight success practices. I came to Nemertes actually back in 2005, having started my relationship with the company on the other side of the phone. I used to be one of the people that Nemertes called up and asked questions of before hopping over and becoming the person asking the questions. And it's been an interesting ride ever since. For this study, we interviewed and surveyed 157 companies in the United States and Canada, crossing about 31 verticals. On average, they're medium-large companies with an average employee count just under 6,000 and an average annual revenue of just under $2 billion. And what we were discussing with them was secure cloud access and policy enforcement technologies. Our acronym SCAPE is meant to convey the end-to-end security needs that go along with enabling zero trust in a hybrid environment encompassing both cloud and on-premises resources, and in cloud, multiple clouds, both SaaS and IaaS and PaaS. As such, it is a superset of the SASE concept in that it adds endpoint technologies like EDR, overarching analytics technologies like XDR, and it embraces alternatives to the cloud VPN model, such as software-defined perimeter technology. So, as we noted at the outset, the goal of today's session is to talk about success in delivering IT technology or delivering IT services in the context of these technologies. So, as we talked about in episode 1 of the series, we look at success in terms of a metric called the SIPI, the number of serious security incidents that take place compared to the overall number of security incidents that IT can detect. So security incidents, serious security incidents per incident is our metric. Overall, across the entire population in the study, the median SIPI was about 0.13, so 13 serious incidents per 100 detected incidents. We parsed through the data and found a success group about the top 21% of organizations whose median SIPI was 0.02, so 2 serious incidents excuse me, per 100 detected. So when we look at success and its relationship to different technologies in the study or practices in IT, we're looking at that SIPI and at that success group. And as you can see, we'll measure the difference in deployment for a given technology or adoption of a given practice between the success group and everybody else. And we will look at the actual SIPI value for folks using a technology versus folks not using a technology. So those are the two metrics that we're looking at, or the two aspects of the metric that we're looking at. In this case, differential deployment by the most successful folks, and a difference in the metric itself for those using a technology versus not. So technologically, we're going to start with endpoint detection and response at one end of the end-to-end security question. And as we discussed in the last episode, EDR is focused on turning all the endpoints in the organization into a sensor network to help detect and, in some cases, respond to cyber threats. So the idea is that you're getting data there and it's being fed into some kind of analytics platform, at the very least a SIEM system, that can then help you spot distributed attacks, low and slow attacks, multifaceted attacks, and respond to them appropriately. Overall, 56% of folks in the response group are using an EDR platform now. The security group is about 2.6% more likely to be deploying it than everybody else. So it's a low correlation with success in that sense. But it is positively correlated. And then as far as the impact on security itself, there is a 50% decrease in the median SIPI for folks using EDR versus folks not. So it's associated with a 50% drop in the number of serious incidents per security incident, and that's a very good thing indeed. So overall, EDR, a good technology to be deploying, but kind of a bandwagon technology at this point, given the low level of difference with the success group. XDR, extended detection and response, is really focused on the analytics side of the equation and taking data from things like the EDR and other data streams across the security and operational landscape and parsing that data, looking for threats based on the behavior of entities in the environment. So what are things doing? It can look at identity, but it's not about who somebody is. It's about what they are doing, either them as a person or the node that they're working on, the application that they're using. So that XDR component is critical in the long run to understanding the kinds of low and slow and multi-pronged attacks that are taking place now increasingly. And it is critical to developing a dynamic security environment, and especially to fully implementing zero trust. We saw that about 41% of organizations overall have begun to deploy XDR in their environment. The success group is slightly less likely to have done so, and the difference in the SIPI is about 40% decline. We believe that the reason the success group is a little slower to adopt on this right now is that they had come to fairly sophisticated infrastructures that did not incorporate an XDR initially, and are working on factoring that into their architectures in their next iteration. Identity and access management as a service, controlling access to the environment by authenticating users' identities. And that can be access to cloud applications, it can be access to on-premises applications, but the service itself is cloud provisioned. 60% of organizations are now using this. It's very broadly deployed. Folks in the success group, 22% more likely to be doing it. And it's associated only with about a 27, 28% decrease in the SIPI, which makes some sense because it's not a mainline security technology. It's not detecting or intercepting threats, but it is squarely in the center of an identity-based security architecture. And so we include it here. And obviously, yes, it does have some positive impact on security, unifying access management, unifying authentication across domains on premises and in the cloud automatically has some security benefits. So there's really no surprise there. Cloud access security brokers, CASBs, developed in the cloud era to try and restore some of the visibility that went missing when organizations began pushing into SaaS solutions and pushing their internally provisioned things into IaaS spaces. CASBs can also provide that identity and access management component, or they will just integrate with one that you have. A little over half of organizations are using CASBs now. We expect that to continue to rise very strongly and steadily over the next 18 months to 2 years. The success group is only about 20% more likely to be deploying currently, and using a CASB is correlated with a 30% drop in SIPI. So a strong success correlation there on the metric side, a medium strong correlation there on the success group side. Overall, something you should be deploying. Now, secure web gateways began life as appliances running in data centers, and network hubs have transitioned to being, or are in the process of transitioning to being largely delivered via cloud services. And this, of course, makes sense because of the ability to dynamically scale and to place the gateways in locations internet adjacent to the services they're either providing or blocking access to. But the big point of the secure web gateway is to enforce organizational policy with respect to what folks can get to on the big internet, and to provide defensive technologies for sanctioned and sort of gray list sites that are neither sanctioned nor forbidden, to protect against malware, for example, being pushed back along a connection, or some kind of probing traffic that might be trying to, again, backtrack on a connection that's been made to some site that's not known to be bad. A little under half, about 46, 47% of organizations are using secure web gateway services. The success group is somewhat more likely, again, in that under 20% range, more likely to be using it than everybody else. Currently, it's not associated with a decrease in the SIPI, using versus not using. We suspect, based on some of the conversations that we were having around it, that is more about folks who are having a really disastrous go of it on the internet, who did not have secure web gateway services in-house. They didn't have an appliance, shifting to service online, and not yet being to the point where they've locked things down as much as they need to, and really taken advantage of the functionality. So their SIPIs are still pretty high, and yet to really show the effect of putting a secure web gateway in service. So we think next year, we ask again, we're going to see a more positive correlation on this. Now, SASE is an interesting piece of this puzzle in that it is not a formally defined security architecture in the same way that something like software-defined perimeter is, but it is a fairly coherent concept of technologies, and has therefore gotten its own market niche, and solutions are being sold as SASE platforms. So we did ask folks who had acquired something as a SASE platform explicitly about their use of it. And we saw only about 37% of organizations have adopted a platform explicitly as a SASE platform. The success group is 9% less likely to have done so. So they're lagging overall a little bit. And that makes sense. Again, they've probably got a much better defined and more solid security architecture already in place, and transitioning to SASE as a solution architecture is something they're less likely to want to embrace quickly. And overall, it's only associated with about a 24% decrease in the SIPI, so that's pretty low on the benefit side. But you know, indications are not bad that as offerings mature, as marketing integration versus real behind-the-scenes deep integration gives way to that more robust solution, we expect to see more successful organizations more likely to adopt, and we expect to see better correlations with the SIPI. Software-defined perimeter is a bit of an outlier in the technology set in that it is the least adopted, fewer than 30% of organizations currently using. The security group, or security success group, is somewhat more likely to be deploying, only about 7/10 more, but somewhat more. And it's associated with a less than 50% decrease in SIPI, about 30%. So, you know, middling as far as improvements in security go, solely on the basis of using SDP versus not. But we see SDP as a solution with an enormous amount of pent-up demand, basically, coming out of the pandemic, as folks are looking continually at how they're going to manage authentication and access management in a context of ongoing, much more hybrid on-premise and work from home patterns. We expect to see something like 50% of folks working from home at any given time in most organizations by the end of 2022, up from maybe 15% now. It's not going to be all day, every day. It's going to be a few days a week, probably, but this is a massive transition. And the need for a security solution that provides a seamless experience for the end user and a seamless policy environment for cybersecurity and IT means that SDP will continue to become more attractive and a greater focus of attention for IT organizations. So this is definitely a space we're telling everybody to keep their eyes on. Now, it's not just about technologies, it's also about how you use them or what you use them for. So we looked at the success correlations for folks who are deploying a SASE solution explicitly, what they're using it for. And the three pieces we were really focused on were that VPN replacement, the secure access layer, and about 43% were using for that. The CASB functionality that's intrinsic to most SASEs, and about 61% are using that. And then, of course, the secure web gateway functionality, about 45% using that. Now, of those, the strongest correlations with success come along with the CASB and most especially the secure web gateway, where you see the biggest difference in deployment by the success group and in the impact on the SIPI. And it is interesting that for the folks using a SASE solution for their secure web gateway, there is a strong and positive correlation with improvements in the SIPI. And that suggests that a secure web gateway alone is not as strong a component of your environment as a secure web gateway integrated into a broader policy environment. So something to keep in mind for those who are considering SASE or already deploying, which pieces to focus on if you want to get the biggest bang for the buck on the security side. As far as other success practices go, we look at a lot of security environmental aspects of operations, and we saw that in SDP and other edge access controlled environments, that it is better to first authenticate devices in the environment and then the users than to take either the other approaches that are possible, user first then device, or both at once. It's not a giant difference, but it is a solid one. Combining EDR and endpoint protection in the same solution. Only about 35% of folks are doing it, but the success group is more than twice as likely to be doing so, and it's associated with an 82% decrease in SIPI, so that is a very strong success practice, as is adopting a zero trust approach. Again, folks in the success group more than twice as likely to be doing it than everybody else, and it's associated with a nearly 61% reduction in SIPI. That does not mean having even fully deployed zero trust solutions. It means making zero trust the focus of your efforts and beginning to deploy them. Strong positive correlations already. So recommendations, and again, I'm going to remind everybody we're about to go into the Q&A session, so get questions into the control panel, anything that's occurring to you, and we will address them, as many as we can, before we wrap this up in about 7 or 8 minutes. Accelerate your evaluation of technologies that have strong correlations with cybersecurity success, such as CASB and IAM as a service. Combine your EDR and endpoint protection in the same client or the same, a pair of matched clients from the same vendor. Insecure edge access, authenticate the device first and then the user. And if you're using a SASE, focus on CASB and secure web gateway functionality. They have the biggest success impact. And consider an SDP instead of using that SASE's secure access layer if you want a bigger bang for that secure edge access buck. And embrace zero trust. Formally embrace it, begin your process of developing architecture and solutions, and make the paradigm shift in your mind. That actually is going to be the focus of the next episode in the series. We're going to dive deep into zero trust and best practices in getting there, and I do hope that you will join us for that. And in the meantime, I will hand it over to Ian to handle the Q&A session here. Ian, back to you.
Yes, I'm here. I'm just waiting for the end there. Just before we go into questions, I want to draw your attention to the registration links in the attachments tab, through which you can register for our upcoming episodes. And you'll see a link to the Nemertes website, as well as LinkedIn profiles, connect with us, ask us questions, and so on. So I'm going to start right in with the questions, and let's see. How can we best evaluate our existing tools for their fit into our future SCAPE zero trust plans?
If you are looking at a broad portfolio of existing solutions in your environment, evaluate them for how broadly they already integrate with other solutions, not from the same vendor. That's a pretty good indicator of how well they'll be able to integrate into a unified environment if you're going to be deploying one. Right now, SCAPE is only our marketing term for this umbrella of technologies. It's not like there's a vendor out there who's going to hand you a SCAPE package that you can then deploy. We just really want folks to be focused on all those things working together in a tight ecosystem, and especially one that is able to share policy definitions. So,
okay. How has the COVID pandemic accelerated the case for zero trust? Sort of an obvious question, but I think we're interested in your take.
What folks are telling us is that one of the things that made them take the plunge is looking ahead, and despite maybe what their CEOs want to have happen, knowing that there's huge pressure to continue a deeply hybridized in-premise and work-from-home environment for users. And wanting to be able to provide really fine-grained access control in a context of anybody could be anywhere at any time has motivated a lot of it. Throw in the acceleration of movement of stuff out of data centers into the cloud that also happened during COVID for a lot of organizations, both lift and shift and actual refactoring or replacement of solutions. And yeah, folks are really hungry for a unifying way of controlling access with a much higher degree of detail than they're used to having.
I think that actually ties in with our next question, which is any recommendations for highlighting SCAPE/Zero Trust benefits to senior management? I think that may actually tie in with some of the things we're talking about next time too.
Yes, and we will definitely dig in further in the Zero Trust session next, but highlighting the benefits of SCAPE as a unifying concept for how you're deploying your technologies. One, that it will simplify life for end users if you can get to a unified way of credentialing them, giving them access to what they should have access to, and blocking them from having access to what they shouldn't have. It should make their lives easier, both getting them stuff faster when they onboard and making their login experiences faster, smoother, and easier as they go through their work days. So that's one benefit right there. Just makes everything easier for them. Should decrease the amount of effort required on the IT side to do all that. So that should also look like a benefit, because it won't necessarily let you reduce headcount. It will just let you focus on more strategic efforts in security than adding somebody to an access control group in Active Directory. Things should get easier, faster, and more automated in this kind of an environment. And then third, of course, the security benefits. You should expect to see a lot fewer serious security incidents as you roll these technologies out and bring them together. And from our discussion in that first episode, and I'll just send everybody to that, from our discussion in the first episode, serious security incident basically means has an impact on the business. It's either affecting users directly in the environment, which means they can't work, or affecting resources in the data center, which means people can't get to them and can't do whatever part of their work that resource provides, or is affecting your ability to serve your customers, which means you are either affecting customer satisfaction or hurting revenue. All of those are strong motivations for upper management, and being able to reduce serious security incidents should improve on all those axes.
Well, that looks like all the questions we have for now. So thanks, John, very much for your time and great questions, everybody. The replay of this session should be up on our channel shortly. So if you found it valuable, please feel free to share with your colleagues. And please take a moment to rate the webinar. It's much appreciated. If you haven't already checked out the links in the attachments tab, I recommend you take a look at those. And thanks very much for joining us today. Please let us know if you think of questions after the fact, and we look forward to seeing you on our next webinar.
Thanks, Ian. Thanks, everybody. Bye.
Thank you, everyone, and goodbye.